Okay. Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to the April 6th meeting of the Curriculum Committee. We've got a good full agenda today, so excited to get started.
Okay, thank you, Bernie. And our team has several updates, and looking forward to talking this morning. First, we have an item that goes back to the fall that we had flagged and wanted to come back to. And Bernie, thanks for the reminder. I wanted to talk about honors and AP placement process to kind of get more of a sense of how that operates at the high school. We essentially got through the course selection in the high school, so we're looking at all those requests. But at times, we know that students look to challenge themselves either with additional rigorous courses, or for the first time, maybe taking an AP or an honors. And so there's a lot of conversation as it relates between the counselor and the student and their current teacher. And so one of the things we put on board book was just a document that shows if a student is looking for a change in course, what that process looks like. But I think more importantly, really just kind of hearing from the high school and how this process unfolds, because it's very personalized in terms of the student. We really want them to find their areas of interests and the right level of challenge. And we tend to err on the side of when it's when a student is looking to try, let's say, an AP or an honors, and it makes sense to give them that opportunity. We're about opportunities in high school, whether it's curricular or co-curricular, that's key. But we want to do that in a way that it's going to set a student up for success. So Julie, you want to just kind of highlight the role of the counselor, the student, the teacher, and the administration in all this?
Sure. Happy to walk you through the process. As I think many of you know, our students, as part of their course selection process, receive recommendations from their teachers about placement for the upcoming year. And those recommendations are based on current performance, what the teacher sees in class in terms of the student's level of achievement and what they think is the most appropriate placement for them in the upcoming year. So a student may receive a recommendation for an honors or AP course from their current teacher just based on their current progress. And that sort of opens a door for that student during the course selection process to be able to select that honors or AP option. In our program of studies, each course description outlines what the parameters are for that particular honors or AP course. So in order for a student to take, let's say, AP English language, they require a recommendation from their teacher, and they also require there is a minimum grade requirement as part of the recommended level of performance for a student who would want to enter that class. In addition, some AP and honors courses have prerequisite courses, so that would also be a piece of the consideration. And the way that our course selection process works, we line up the screens in PowerSchool to I guess the best word is open particular options to students based on their previous courses and their teacher recommendations and such. All that being said, there are times when students want to pursue certain courses, either at the honors or AP level, that they have not received a recommendation for, either because their current performance doesn't indicate a readiness for that level, or maybe because in an elective area, that's not a course that they have taken previously, so there is not a place for a teacher recommendation. And in that event, a student can talk with one of our staff members about the possibility of taking that course, either an honors level course or an AP course. They can begin that conversation with their teacher, depending on the course they're looking for, or they can have that conversation with their school counselor. All of our school counselors meet with all of their students each year during the course selection process. So students select their courses at home with their parents and with various documents, the program of studies and such. And then following those initial selections, they meet individually with their counselors. The counselors go through, as part of that meeting, where are you in your graduation progress? What other courses were you recommended for that you haven't requested as part of the process in Power School? What does your overall course load look like? And they try and provide some advice and guidance in that regard. And so that often is the moment when a student might say, I have an interest in taking, let's say, AP Human Geography next year, and I wasn't recommended for that particular course. How do I go about pursuing that? So we have a course placement request form. Many students take advantage of the use of this form, and essentially it is a form that allows a student to request placement in a course that they've not been recommended for. And it sort of lays out our process, what we do when we receive those requests, our timeline when they will receive notification about determinations. And it also asks the student and the parent to sign off and indicate that they understand that they are pursuing a course that's at a high level of challenge and that, they will be held to a certain expectation. So we give a period of time to collect those forms, and usually they're due in the month of March. And as the forms are collected, we essentially populate a spreadsheet of all of the student requests for courses that students were not recommended for. And then those requests go through a process by which they are reviewed by various people, including school administrators, as well as curriculum instructional leaders, and sometimes down to classroom teachers in the highly specialized areas. And what that team is looking for are really indications of readiness. Perhaps there's something that the classroom teacher didn't see. Perhaps there is information that is sort of outside of, let's say, Power School and grades that could help indicate or predict a student's readiness for success in that course. So that team will look at assessment grades. They will look at standardized testing scores if those are helpful. They will look at past performance going back sometimes into middle school. They will look at overall areas of interest and course trajectory, I guess I would say. Depending on the course area, they might be looking at different things. And that team ultimately discusses, debates, and makes determinations. I will tell you that I went back through the requests from the last 4 years. Typically, we have somewhere between 100 and 200 course placement requests. I'll call them waiver requests, right? Requests for placement in a course that students were not recommended for. And note that they would need to create a separate form for multiple requests. So if I am a student and I want to pursue 3 AP courses that I wasn't recommended for, I would need to submit 3 forms. So that, somewhere between 100 and 200 requests might not be that many discrete students. And over the last 4 years, in looking at the rate of approval of those requests, we're typically somewhere in the 65 to 70% approval range. So for the most part, the majority of those requests are approved just through that process. Sometimes it goes beyond that. Sometimes we might see something that is sort of a red flag and say, we're really concerned that this student might not be able to find their greatest success in this course. Maybe that's because they have 5 other AP courses on their schedule. Maybe it's because of some indication in performance in their current class. Whatever the reason might be, if there's a concern and that initial request is denied, there is recourse. There is a process following that initial request. So that would include the student meeting with the assistant principal to talk about, to really get a better understanding of why is this course so important to you? Why do you feel like you are going to meet with success? What can we do to support you? Those kinds of things. So after that initial approval process, I guess I would say there are additional students that are approved for those requests. And that continues, right now for this year, the team has just reviewed all of the initial requests and made their initial determinations. And those determinations will go out in a letter to families, so they will be notified. And then the corrections will be made in the students' Power School course requests. So if they're approved for a particular course, then that gets added to their course requests so we can plan our scheduling accordingly. Sorry, I just realized I was talking very fast. I'm going to slow down. But then that process continues. So often over the summer, we get new requests that come in. Hey, I was thinking about this and I really want to take this course. Can I make a change now? So that process of reviewing requests continues. And of course, when we have new students coming in or other things, a process continues really right up to the new school year. So I guess I would say overall, I feel like we have a robust process for looking at situations where students would like to take courses that they have not been recommended for. And the data shows that overwhelmingly we are encouraging students to do this. And I think I'll add sort of anecdotally, sometimes the conversation comes down to, well, this student is going to be a senior and they've never taken an AP or honors course before. And maybe we have a concern that they're not going to be an AB student in this course, but we want to give them that opportunity. So sometimes it really comes down to the very unique circumstances of individual students. And as Ken said, really trying to err on the side of allowing students to take on a challenge. But we have to find a balance in that. And I think that's where, there is a particular line here. We don't want to set students up for failure. We want them to be able to challenge themselves, but we want them to be able to find some success within that challenge. So finding a balance that's right for a particular student. And that can be a hard thing sometimes to predict. So one of the things that happens often, I guess I would say, is in the fall when the year has started, usually about 4 to 6 weeks into the quarter, we get a little bit of a wave of students requesting to change the level of their course. And that's to be expected as part of this process. It's sort of a safety net that we have in place. We do not recommend that students do that. Changing a course after the year has started puts them at a disadvantage, but we also don't want to trap students in a course where they are not finding success. So, the flip side of this process, I think, is sometimes we allow students to take on a challenge and they realize rather quickly that it's a little bit beyond their means. And then we have a process to allow them to a certain point in the year to drop down from that AP or honors course into a level course that is more appropriate for them.
And Julie, is it fair to say, with some of the more challenging decisions, like let's say it's in a math course or science, you might say to a student, we're going to see how the third quarter goes or the fourth quarter goes. And then we're going to make that decision because, for some students, that part of the course gives us additional information. And I think we even do that at the middle school when we're looking at levels at times.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a good point. Thank you, Ken. Because of the timing of this process, we are trying right now to determine the number of sections of particular courses that we will offer, the staffing that we will need for next year. And we can only do that when our numbers are correct. And so that's why we have to kind of move this waiver process along as quickly as we do. But Ken's right. There are times when we don't feel as though we can make a determination with the information that we have in that moment, and sometimes we delay. And it is most often, I would say, in math and science because of the way sometimes the units are structured. Well, and often this will come from the CILs because they know the curriculum backward and forward. Well, I know that this unit is coming up in the fourth quarter, and that will be really indicative of how this student will fare in this particular course.
For my own clarification, does this conversation come from a place of we're just looking at what the process is and things seem to be working well, or is there a concern that students either aren't asking for waivers or aren't being considered?
I do not have that concern. I can tell you that nationally, and I'm going to talk only about AP because I have this comparison. Nationally, the class of 2020, 38.3% of students in the class of 2020 took an AP course nationally, 38.3. In the state of Connecticut, that statistic rises to 46.7%. 46.7% of graduates in the class of 2020 took an AP course over the course of their high school career. Now, I looked at our current seniors, so the data might be a little bit skewed, but the class of 2022 at Weston High School, 84% of our current seniors have enrolled in an AP course over their 4 years at Weston High School. 84%, so nearly double the rate of the Connecticut statistics. So I do not have a concern that our students don't have access to AP courses or to honors courses. I was asked to present this information. I think it came up at a board meeting in the fall. There was just a question, I think, really around our process.
Yeah, David, I asked that we could put this agenda on the item on the discussion today to kind of let us on the board get a better understanding of what the process looks like and how it would feel for students to go through, so that we could, be knowledgeable about that and feel comfortable.
Yeah, and it's very timely. I mean, this is the time of the year when this is taking place. And just to add to what Julie said, some of those statistics, we made a big move in 2016-17 in increasing access to AP courses. I think we were in the 50s in terms of percent participation in classes. But since then, it's been consistently in the mid 70s. And it's fluctuated here. You have an even higher percentage this year. And part of that was, we had looked at our processes at that time, but also increased the number of APs that have a broader, let's say, appeal or access to students or availability in terms of that course content. So, I think we have, Julie's at 22, 23 AP courses right now. I mean, it's over 20 courses that we're running. And we had added courses such as the AP Human Geography, AP Psych, AP Environmental. Those kinds of moves helped with access. And we have received awards in the district. I think there's an AP, I forget the name of it.
I think they call it the honor roll.
Yeah, so sort of, for districts that increase their participation, we had gotten that honor. So, but I think, there could be, what I would say is if a family, a student is having, concerns about placement, or they don't like the result of the process, to just, again, talk with the counselor, talk with, whoever it is that most appropriate in advising that student on that issue. And again, I think we're trying to give opportunities, but
And I'll just add, because I have the opportunity, step up on my soapbox. AP is a unique experience, and I am a former AP teacher, so I don't say this lightly. AP is not for everyone. It is a prescribed curriculum. It does, often the AP curriculum emphasizes breadth over depth, and that is one thing that the pandemic taught us, is slowing down and taking more opportunity to go in depth into certain skills can really be beneficial for students. And this is not to diss AP. AP is a great program. I'm happy to have it. I'm happy that we have as many courses as we do. But it's not the only avenue for a student to challenge him or herself. we have lots of opportunities via our honors program and even standard courses that are really unique. I mean, I'm going to call up the sustainable living course, brand new course for next year that you all approved, that we're very excited about. That's going to have tremendous benefit for those students and really challenge what it means to be a student in a traditional high school. And that is not an honors level course, and it's not an AP course. So we are a small high school, and we have the ability to really truly individualize the educational experience that our students have. AP is one way to do that. There are lots of other ways to do that. So, we're proud of our accomplishments regarding AP, but also, I just want to put that out there that it's not the only option.
So to sort of just kind of summarize, I think so if the way a student gets placed into AP starts out initially with a recommendation from a teacher, and some other criteria, right? So first, their student is potentially suggested for an AP course, and then that follows its process. But if you have a student who is not recommended, but a student who wants access to the AP course, they fill out a waiver. And then that, as you say, kind of gave us the process for how that is considered. How does if in the first scenario, a student is recommended, right? So they don't really take any action. It's passive on their part. Presumably they're just told, hey, we're going to recommend you for this AP course. How does a student become aware of an AP course to pique their interest when they're not recommended to get to the waiver process? How is that made known?
So we have a comprehensive program of studies that we update every year, and we push out to students and to families at the start of the course selection process. That document really gives a lot of detail on all of the courses that we offer at the high school. In addition, we have a document that we changed the name of this year. Hopefully, I'm going to call it by the right name, Departmental Course Sequence. It's really a visual document to show everyone, within a particular department, what is the recommended sequence or pathway, if you will. And again, shows in a visual way all of the course options available within each department. And then within the school building, teachers in certain content areas walk through with students that departmental course sequence and the program of studies document to say, well, hey, okay, I'm an English teacher, so today I want to just talk to you. You're a group of 10th graders. I want to talk to you about your options for courses for next year, both for your regular English class and some of your elective options. So we try and cover all bases. And then again, there's that touch point in the one-on-one with the counselor to make sure, oh, I see that you have an interest in this particular area, or, oh, hey, I know we've talked about this before. Have you thought about? And we make sure that the counselors have all of the information that they need in that regard, because ahead of the course selection process, the counseling staff meets individually with each one of our curriculum instructional leaders to learn about, here are the merits or the hallmarks of this particular course. Here are the new courses that we're offering within this department this year, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so short of filling out the waiver on behalf of the student, there's plenty of opportunity to take a student who otherwise was not recommended and get them to the point where they've had the one-on-one, they've had the regular classroom teacher speak to them as a group. So the opportunity seems to clearly exist. They just have to fill out the waiver. That's on them, getting them to the point of the waiver. It seems like the district or the high school or the teachers make that opportunity well known.
Yes, we try. And as I said, we have this process that's front loaded. It happens primarily in February and March, but sometimes we get a form that comes in July, and we will not accept that form at that time. We give it its due whenever it comes in. So we try as hard as we can. And I think, each year we have well over 100 waiver requests. So I think students really are availing themselves of this process.
I just want to jump in on that really quick. I'm thinking about a student, you're in a class, you just got your course sheet and you're not recommended for an honors class or the AP class. Are you comfortable with the barriers that a student might be facing to have to go and get a form and fill it out in the face of, clearly the teacher you're sitting with isn't recommending you? How, do the students understand the process and, who are they handing the form into? So, do they have to give it to their classroom teacher? Can they hand it in the front office?
So the course selection process begins with an advisory. And we actually create a video each year, and we send out certain documents. So we address all of the students through their small group advisory to say, hey, the course selection process is starting, calling your attention to these particular documents, start thinking about planning. They don't actually have access to their specific recommendations until the PowerSchool portal opens for course requests. So it's not as if I'm handing you, Bernie, a student in my class, a sheet. Here's my recommendation to you, right? It's not transactional in that way. When the student actually sits down to choose their courses for the following year, which we encourage happens with parents, right, as a family conversation, that is the point where they will see the courses that they have been recommended for. So they kind of have everything all in one place, and they can make their initial choices. As I said, every student then has a one-on-one following that process with their counselor. And that is the opportunity for them to say, hey, I was interested. I was talking with my parents about taking this course. How do I do that? The counselor gives them that form right there in that moment. The counselor records that they have distributed that form. So we have a record of all of the forms we've distributed, effectively all of the interest that was stated. And then the student returns that form to the counseling office. It does not come back to the individual teacher. I think that would be kind of awkward if we did things that way. It's literally a return in the counseling office, and then the return forms are recorded as well. So we do actually have a record of the students who expressed interest but didn't ultimately return their form, which is very few in the long run. But yes, to take that kind of individual element off the table.
And then I think I saw the form that's attached to board book, right? Is that the form they filled? I noticed there wasn't a free response area on the form for the student to write in their personal reasons why they would want to be considered for it. Do you think that would be something that'd be valuable to add? I know there's so many people involved in the approval process, and you were talking about some of the other indicators like test scores and grades in other subjects that are factored in. Would it be helpful for you to see exactly why, or see the passion perhaps that's coming through, if the student could explain that in their application?
It could be. I also wonder if that could be prohibitive for some students. Like, oh, if I have to write an essay, if you will, then I'm not gonna do this process. And a lot of that information actually comes to us through the counselor. So again, when the counselor is recording that they've distributed the form, they have a space in the sheet where we record these things to make some notes. Student isn't really interested in this course, has never taken an AP before, just some quick notes. It's worth considering, but I wouldn't want to add something that would deter a student from engaging in the process.
And maybe even just an optional ability to be able to add if they want to. I'm just trying to think by grade. By the time you're a junior and a senior, you've had a lot of experience with your counselor. You've seen them for so many years. I'm thinking more now towards the younger end of the spectrum, maybe the freshmen and the sophomores who might not feel comfortable having this detailed conversation or personal conversation with the counselor they've, just building a relationship with. I'm just trying to think of other ways, other barriers that we could possibly take down that would just allow all students to feel like they've had the full ability to be considered in every way.
Bernie, sorry, Julie, go ahead.
So that's okay. I just wanted to note, because I didn't mention this before, current 8th graders go through this process with their 8th grade counselor. So the 8th grade counselor works together with the high school counselors on this process and is involved in the creation of that sheet. So students who are transitioning to 9th grade do have the ability to work with someone who they're very comfortable with at that point.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Bernie, I think to a large extent, based on what Julie and Ken has told us, we have an obligation to provide equal access, right, to all of our students. And there are students who are going to get recommended and students who aren't. And we want to make sure the students that don't get recommended have an opportunity to be considered, right? So I think that just starts with equal access. And it sounds to me like we definitely, as a district, are providing equal access. As far as taking down barriers go, I think that you don't want to take down so many barriers that there's no effort on the part of the student, because that's part of growing up and being responsible, right? They're going to, throughout their life, and I'm, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but, just to kind of underscore that, I think it was either Patty or even maybe at the elementary school, they talked about being, advocating for yourself, right? That's one of the things that we're doing in Weston, is making sure our kids advocate for themselves. So I think that you don't want to take down so many barriers, especially for an advanced placement course, where the student doesn't have to put some effort into it, as a lesson, not because we want to, not as a barrier, but more as, hey, you didn't get something that you think you're eligible for. So this is the process, and it does require a little bit more effort, but you will be fully considered no differently than the student who was recommended by a teacher. So I don't want to take down too many barriers that there isn't any personal accountability or rather personal responsibility.
As in all things, there's a balance. There's a healthy balance, and the process changes a little bit every year because we learn something, and we try new things. And as Ken said, it's a relatively new process overall. We've been doing this for 4 years now, 5 years. I think this is now the 5th time we're doing this. Overall, it's been working well, but we've made some tweaks, and we'll continue to do that because, as you are all saying, we want to give students opportunities, but we want to do that with a safety net.
Agreed. I mean, I think to the barrier comment, it's not all barriers from the school. I think the process sounds very healthy, and it sounds like there's so many good ways that the adults are considering the applications for these waivers. I just mean more, sometimes the barriers are personal. Like some kids are getting a lot more support from their parents in terms of being encouraged to do this. Others maybe not as much. Some students have had experience and are more out extroverted to begin with and have more confidence going through the process, some not. So it's some of those students where there could be interpersonal issues, that those kinds of barriers, that it's our obligation as a school to kind of strengthen and make sure we're meeting those students where they are as well, so that they can then take advantage of the access that's available. So that's kind of the tact I was, looking through the lens of when I'm going through this process, just making sure that we are addressing all of the students who might be going through this or considering it. The last thing I was just curious about, and I know it sounds like you're doing quite a bit of tracking, the number of students who take the waiver, turn in the waiver. Are we then looking at the ultimate outcomes in the whole process by, grade level? Are we looking at it by gender and by race and by SPED status to make sure that we are healthy in our acceptance process?
So our follow-up has typically been to try to assess the degree to which our decisions are appropriate. So what we have done is, in each school year following that waiver process, at the end of semester 1, we look at how are those students doing? How many of those students stayed in the course that they were approved to take, because a lot of them, as I said, will end up dropping at some point. How are they doing? What is their current level of performance? And, is there anything that we can learn from that process? So we do revisit the process in the following year to try to see, did we do a good job of predicting who was going to find success? And I think I would say that often results in some of the tweaks to the process. In terms of, are we tracking the number of students from various subgroups that are submitting waivers or who are approved? I can't say that we have done that. Often those subgroups are so small that it may not necessarily yield actionable data. It's certainly something I can look at, but it's not part of the recording process. We look at students as students. We look at their current performance. We're not necessarily, as part of this process, also tracking which subgroup they belong to.
Yeah, I meant it less for student success and more for just us as to make sure that our process is unbiased. Are we doing steps to confirm that there's no bias on our part in terms of who we're letting in, and subconsciously, nothing intentional, or was anybody slipping through the cracks because of perhaps the way that we're looking at this system? So we're looking at it right now, and it looks like a very healthy, robust system. Looking at some of these statistics and making sure the outcomes of students who received placement into the courses would be another way for us to go back and make sure we're not missing something or a key piece. We're not alienating a group in the way that we're running our process.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Good point. Okay. Are we ready to move on, or do we have any more questions? I know we have Alex waiting here. All right. Well, thank you, Julie. I really appreciate that. You're welcome. You're welcome to stay, or if you have other things, you certainly can drop off. So the next agenda item is our, continued follow-up on meeting, our reading and math goals. And we're going to look at one of the action steps here today that we had identified at the beginning of the year, but have been talking about for the past couple of years. And we're going to really zero in on third grade reading, that transition year, and that, that really critical year that, students have to be able to read by the end of third grade at the grade level standard, because that sets them up for being able to access content as they move forward in fourth grade and on. So, we have really a comprehensive literacy program that we want to strengthen, partially as a result of the pandemic. We know our students in the elementary level, probably most challenged by the pandemic, given the way learning unfolded remotely and in hybrid. So we think that we have a way here that we're going to strengthen by extending our Foundations program. It's our phonics component of our literacy program, and want to extend that into third grade. So Alex is going to run us through the thinking. Where does Foundations fit in our literacy program, and then we'll end with the implementation aspects of this, training aspects, costs, which are addressed through ESSER, which we had identified early on. So, Alex, thanks for joining us this morning, and I know you have a Google slide presentation. Do you want to share that, or if you need help with that? You're muted, Alex.
Hold on 1 minute. Let me share. Hold on. Hold on. Let me make sure. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So our comprehensive literacy program, we are extending in order to make it more robust, more explicit. We are extending the Foundations program into grade 3. As you may know, Foundations has been a core part of the K-2 literacy curriculum for, I want to say, about 10 years now. The components of a comprehensive literacy program that are looked for include phonological awareness, including phonemic awareness. It includes phonics, oral reading fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. So the components of this that Foundations includes, it would extend the work being done on explicit word work in K-2. Foundations does focus both on word reading, decoding, and spelling. So it is both. It's sort of a reciprocal program that way. So it provides an explicit spelling program in third grade. It incorporates a research-based grade level scope and sequence of instruction, which continues from what students had in K2. It's a natural continuation. And it supports the components of structured literacy that we would want to include more of in our third grade curriculum and in a more explicit way that is program based. The state of Connecticut is also planning to require components of structured and comprehensive literacy. There is legislation at the state that would basically require all districts to show that they are using one of these programs in all of their classrooms K3 as part of their regular curriculum. So this would satisfy that requirement as well. The important features of Foundations are that it is structured, it is explicit, and it is cumulative. So it builds on what students already know. It is multisensory. It engages multiple learning modalities. Multisensory instruction is particularly important for some of our struggling, needier learners, but it really is important for every student. It provides the opportunity for ongoing and immediate feedback. There is a lot of spelling in particular that that can be the result of almost bad habits, I will say, where if a student spells a word incorrectly and they don't get that immediate feedback, that incorrect spelling may linger and persist, where this program provides the opportunity to give that feedback immediately. There are unit assessments to determine where additional instruction is needed so that students or teachers can pull small groups for additional support with different skills. The tier 1 instruction would happen 3 times a week for 30 minutes. And there is a tier 2 intervention program that is included if it is needed. And so that would fill in to our SRBI program overview. So it would be an SRBI program that we could use that aligns with the core curriculum in the classroom for students that would benefit from it. I'm going a little fast. I can't see anyone. So if there are questions or anything, just please jump in.
Sure.
So this is sort of our overall plan of training, implementation, and how we gauge its effectiveness. So in the fall, all of our third grade teachers, our all special education teachers in the building, and our reading specialists will engage in a one-day training with the Foundations trainer. We're looking to use the August 25th Professional Development Day for that. This benefits us in 2 ways. The first is that it gives the training at the right time, immediately before teachers will go into their classrooms and start using the program. We had looked at June and it just didn't make sense to do the training and then have the summer off and then, come in. In August, we're fresh and it'll be the right time. It also prevents us from needing to provide subs to have all of those teachers out of their classrooms for a whole day for the training. So to be able to use our PD day in August was really ideal, and the Foundations people were able to accommodate us for that. The program, the first year program also includes, what we pay for includes 5 additional sessions throughout the year with the staff developer. So those are 5 one-hour sessions with the staff developer to engage in problem solving, answering questions, additional training. It provides sort of in the moment, on the go help for our teachers as they're implementing this new program. There is also administrator training so that administrators understand the program and can support the work that teachers are doing in the classrooms.
Alex, if I can just interrupt for a second. Now, I know you went and you, I think it was you and Nicole joined Laura and Andrea down at Hurlbut to observe the second grade program. I think it would be helpful because you know the second grade program, and now you've got a sense of the third. Just give us a flavor. What is a typical progression lesson look like for 30 minutes? If you can just give us a sense of the program.
Yeah, so there are several different lessons. Every day is a little bit different. And we went into 2 second grade classrooms and 1 first grade classroom. So I will preface my answer by saying I am not an expert on this program. I have not been trained in it yet. But what I observed was a lot of explicit instruction in letter and word sounds, letter combinations, sounds that they make, word parts, as in suffixes. Students learn what, every week, I believe, there's a different pattern that is learned. So, for example, maybe it's the EA says E, and they work in different words that use that. They segment sounds. There's a spelling component where they write the words, they code the words, so they underline or like put a loop underneath the vowel combination that they're learning. They loop different parts of the word. If there are different syllables, they divide syllables of words. And then there's a practice component where they write additional words in like a consumable book, and they write sentences that use the words, and all of those are dictated by the teacher. There's the beginning of the lesson incorporates a lot of pretty quick review of previously learned concepts that build automaticity. So it really builds students' ability to visually recognize these patterns for decoding and use and access those patterns for encoding and spelling. So it's sort of a fast-paced, highly engaging lesson that takes place that covers all of this. So that is my description of what I observed. It is very multisensory. There's chanting. There's the spelling component is they learn the different parts of the lines that they write. Like they write for certain letters, they go up to the cloud and then down to the ground, and they learn this way of even letter formation in the program that is pretty fabulous. So I think that to be able to continue with that into 3rd grade will be highly effective. And I will say that our 3rd grade teachers are anxious for it. They, in a good way, not anxious, nervous. I mean, they want it. They're looking forward to it. They want a more explicit program to be able to teach all of these skills that will help kids as readers and as writers.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you on you were finishing up the training.
Oh, right. So the goal of all of this is transfer, right? If what we're teaching is not transferring into reading and writing, why are we doing it? So we want skills transferred into student writing and reading with independence. So, next year around this time, we will start looking at student writing on their independent on-demand assignments, their assessments, their writer's notebook through the lens of these taught spelling skills. It would be great to use some PD time for that next year, and to look at how it is transferring into accurate fluent reading. So the idea is that students learn these word parts and sounds so that they recognize them in words automatically. And when students can read with automaticity, they can read fluently.
Why don't we pause here, Alex,
Okay.
for questions?
Sounds really good.
I think it'll be wonderful. I'm excited that we're able to do this.
I may have missed this, Alex, but is there cursive training as well?
So the third grade program incorporates cursive.
Okay.
I will tell you that we're still sort of deciding whether we're going to utilize that component or whether we're going to continue with the manuscript handwriting. One of the things that we learned, post-pandemic is that when kids were learning from home, there was some handwriting that, was very difficult to teach because you need to be able to see the students physically forming those letters. So I think that's a question for looking at the student writing, the students that are coming in the fall, and whether it benefits us more to continue with another year of the regular writing, at least for next year's 3rd graders, rather than incorporate the cursive and maybe bring the cursive in after that for this year's 1st graders, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yes, the third grade curriculum, introduces the cursive writing.
Okay, thank you.
And Alex, we have not spent much time on cursive over the years. I mean, in recent years, it has not really been a part of our curriculum. We have had other priorities, and given that time is also a factor, having this program in 30 minutes 3 times a week, scheduling, we're working that out. And again, I think the spelling piece is the highest, is one of the higher priorities of the program at the moment.
Agree.
And that's where we're putting the time and energy.
Yeah, I'm the only reason I ask cursive is, me, I'm like a broken record, but the ideal learning methods, Montessori, et cetera, begin at first grade and second grade with cursive, because it is like they do cursive in lieu of regular writing, because it is a more natural motion for them to learn. And so I literally, it was a curious question as to whether or not you're introducing it, because there is a well-regarded bit of research that says it's the right way to start, but I know that we don't do that. So I'm not saying please change it. I was just curious as to whether or not it's included at some point. No, I got my answer. Thank you.
Okay.
And it's definitely part of the resources and program if we choose it at some point.
Ken, so you sort of touched upon this when right before you introduced Alex. So I mean, I think this is great, and I think that most people know that the students in Weston, grade level to grade level, our students are more advanced than some of the other towns, or quite a few other towns, not necessarily Weston and Wilton, but other parts of the state. My question is, you mentioned that we're offsetting this with ESSER funds. So my question really is what is the plan? Is this something that's sustainable? Is there a plan to
Go to the next slide, Alex.
Yep,
Okay.
It's like I planted you. So this is the overall cost. There's a startup cost, and then there's a year-to-year cost. So the startup cost are our teachers' guides, the instructional materials, which can be used year over year, and then there are student consumables. So all of that is included. They get you started up. The teacher's guides, obviously, we keep. The instructional materials, we keep. I will say that the instructional materials, they do involve letter tiles. So sometimes, like if a few of them get lost, we may need to order replacements. But overall, what you start up with, you keep. The cost for next year includes the training, shipping and handling. So the overall cost for the startup year is $18,936.50. After that first year, it will cost us about $21 per student for the consumable materials. And so that is what would need to get absorbed into our budget, or added to our budget.
So the 18,000 that has been paid for by ESSER?
That will be paid. Yeah, we have allotted for that through ESSER.
And the $21 per student. Not every student receives this additional support, right?
It would just be for third grade students.
Okay.
We already have the consumables in our budget for grades K to 2.
It would be an additional cost item for third grade moving forward.
And
So you're talking about $2,500 to $3,000 depending on the number of students on annual cost around that. If you're looking at about $21 a student.
But the $21 per student is just for the third grade students.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. And there's no additional staffing needs for this?
No,
No.
because we're planning to train. It's delivered by the classroom teacher, and we're also going to train all of our SPED staff, our special education teachers who work in those classrooms, and we're going to train myself and our 2 reading specialists, so that everybody who would be working in classrooms or out of classrooms with students on any component of this program has been trained.
And then what happens, you talked about training the staff. So what happens as you have staff turnover and a new teacher comes in, or what does that cost look like, and what does getting them on board look like?
So there's two options when that happens. One is that Foundations does offer one-day trainings for new staff that we could, I don't have the cost of what those trainings are per teacher offhand. I could find that for you. The other option is that once I go through the training and live it, I could train that teacher. So we could use a train the trainer model. Honestly, to be honest with you, having, not done it myself, I can't really tell you which one would be better. An on-site person like myself who can be here all the time and train you, or to have like the Foundations professional train you.
And we know that there's attrition in the quality of training and the trainer model unless you have those folks come back in on a semi-regular basis and refresh your skills and everyone else's. Like there's an attrition, so it's worth having that consultant continue to be involved.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is that, everything's great until you start looking at the details, right? So, but we're using Foundations now at the lower grade level. So you're just talking about introducing it into third grade level,
Correct.
Which requires training the third grade educators. So from an ongoing cost, the $21 per student seems fairly low, but in order to maintain the program, you have to train people. And we know that there's always going to be turnover. So it sounds like you have some plan, hopefully, to at least use the trainer. Alex, you'll get trained, and then you'll be able to train new folks. What about some method by which to look at the success of this program? How are you going to, being that you're not offering it in third grade now, if this were approved, how do you create a point in time today and a point in time a year from now, or a year from implementation, to show that this was a investment that had improved our students and therefore it was worthwhile?
Right. So I think that is where we look at, we deep dive into evaluating student writing and student reading, because the program does come with assessments. Every unit, every concept that you teach, there is an assessment that comes at the end. So we can see how students are performing on those assessments. So that's one way that we know that they're learning and carrying over and bringing forward what they've learned on an ongoing basis. That's important. What we also need is to make sure that what they're learning as spellers and as readers is showing up in their writing and their reading. So that would come from evaluating their actual writing from the lens of the spelling concepts and rules that they've learned in the program.
Okay, so I think that's one of the things that we as a district or a board have not always or get questions on is, okay, so making the investment, right? I think by and large, people in Weston want to make investments in the schools. Our students do well, but we need something tangible. We need basically to plot what our starting point was and plot where we are a year later. And then we can say, this program has improved our students by this amount, and therefore it's worthwhile. So I think any kind of new program like this, it needs to be included that there's going to be a baseline that we're starting with, and then ongoing assessments to make sure that it's worth continuing.
Yes, I think it's an added layer to the way that we look at, assess, score our student writing on demands. So the on demands are whole pieces of writing that students draft in one sitting that show us what they know about a certain kind of writing. And we look at it for things like organization and craft and transitions and elaboration and all of that. And we look at it for spelling, but this will give us another lens through which to look at that student writing. Because if they're not doing it independently, it usually means they didn't internalize it. And so that is something that we are going to need to look at more through that really explicit lens of what we have taught them and how it is showing up in their writing every day.
And Ken, is this offset by anything? Is there anything at the third grade level that this replaces, and therefore we don't have some other expense?
Well, I would just say that the professional development, any going forward, let's say you have a new teacher coming in, we'll absorb that. by, with the existing training and conference lines. We wouldn't be looking to request additional, but in terms of replacing another program, Alex, we're not, it's basically not, it's a new cost, David.
How many years does the foundations program extend possibly? And is there any thought to whether or not, if it's successful in third grade, it's something we might want to do in fourth or fifth?
Currently, Foundations does not have a fourth and fifth grade curriculum. That doesn't mean that they won't develop one, but they don't have one right now. There is, a possibility that because we are teaching Foundations in third grade 3 days a week rather than every day, there could be components of the third grade curriculum that could be brought into fourth grade the following year. I think we want to see how successful it is first, whether that's something that is needed in fourth and fifth grade. So in fourth and fifth grade for spelling, what you really and reading, what you really get into is Greek and Latin roots and multisyllable words. And so I think after next year, we see, how our third graders are doing with everything that they're learning from now K3 in Foundations. And then we look ahead to fourth and fifth grade and what those needs may be. It may be continuing some of the Foundations work, or it could be something else.
Yeah. David, just on that question you had on what does this offset or replace? From an instructional standpoint, this was lacking in that, we had teachers trying to deliver it sort of on their own. It was not in a systematic, formal way. It is replacing, that teachers were trying to, to do this on their own.
Yeah. No, and my position is not always about the money. It's just things add up, right? So if there is if the cost justifies the outcome, it's an easy, it's an easy sell, so to speak, right? If our students do better, and that's why, there's two ways of going about it, right? There's some other program goes away, and this offsets that, or a portion of that program offsets this, or the students are doing better, right? They both, at the end of the day, the students doing better is the real goal. But if we can find some other way where we're offsetting costs, that is a bonus.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay. Well, thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you.
And just so the members know, we've been, this was being discussed just before the pandemic. Obviously, we couldn't go forward at that time, but we're pleased to bring that to you at this time, because we think it's very timely and necessary. So thank you, Alex. Once again, you're welcome to stay, or you can get back to your day. And I will be over there soon. I'll be coming to WISH shortly to relieve Lisa. And she did text me to say she's not going to be able to join the call, but so maybe she's got a lot going on in that main office there.
All right. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna go meet with a student. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Take care.
All right. And so, I think we've had this common theme of looking at data, looking at information as it relates to reading and math all year long. I was intending just briefly to show you what I think is kind of some helpful information in looking at a longitudinal view of our map information, because while we have not tested with our map assessment fall, winter, and spring like we're doing this year in previous years, what we are able to do is look back on some of the years where we've had at least a fall administration, or maybe a fall and a winter, to see how we're trending. And so I'm going to just ask for an assist from Dan on this with if you could share the screen. I would like to share sort of that longitudinal view, because I think what it shows us is, whether or not we're transitioning back towards pre-pandemic levels? That was the question I'm trying to answer. Are we headed in the right direction? Are we, moving, where we should be? And Dan, I don't know if that's large enough. Okay, that's better. So what we looked at is first we're looking at math. We looked at the mean percentile on the map by grade level. What was the average score percentile that students were scoring in? And we then looked back. So if we're talking 8th graders, we look back, where were they as a mean percentile in 7th grade, in 6th grade, in 5th grade. So looking at approximately the same cohort of students. So actually it'd be easier, Dan, if I describe this from the first slide. So if we look at math and all 8th graders, that first row, all 8th graders, below that are the 3 different math courses that we have. And on the far right in blue, that's information we've shared previously, that in the fall, 72%, 72 was the average percentile in the fall. About the same, 71 was the average percentile. So, 21, 22 points to the right of where nationally students had scored. But you see, going back those 8th graders to the pandemic year, we were in the spring at a average 68th percentile. Just before that, in fall of 1969 and fall of 1868. So,
but we're not reading this. We're not reading this across the line, because those aren't the same kids across the years.
Actually, it is, Taffy. We're actually looking. So, for example, in blue, and let's just take fall for now. Fall was 72, and then fall of 2019, because we missed a year, 60, the 9th percentile, and then 68 back when they were 5th graders. So blue was 8th, yellow when we didn't test was 7th, green was 6th, and the light blue was 5th. So that's sort of how this works. It kind of reads, right to left, in that you're going back to where were they previously. So as 5th graders, if we go, well before the pandemic in the fall there, 68 was the mean percentile. So if your child had a percentile of, 75, that year you were a little above, you were, 60, a little below. I think that gives you a sense that what we're, in that current 8th grade cohort trended, either back towards or above, in this case, where they were pre-pandemic, in terms of, this is just the mean percentile. And you could see where we are for the 3 levels of math. And I like to look fall to fall to fall across, because you're looking at the same test administration period, the beginning of a year, so after the summer. And if I look down, at 7th grade, all 7th graders, we were at, is that 68, Dan, or 69? Looks like. It's just
for the fall, 69 fall of this year.
69, and then back, pre-pandemic in 18 in the fall, 66, and then prior to that, 63. So, I mean, we see this as, those 7th graders back when they were in 4th grade in 2018, that average percentile is up if you keep looking fall to fall. And then at the bottom, you see the 6th graders on the far right in blue. We did have some tests last year with that 6th grade in both the fall and the winter and the spring. But again, I think you're seeing it's just trending, similar to or, slightly above where those percentile were pre-pandemic. Here again, we are just including where we have data. And again, we're trying to get a sense of how we're trending. So current fifth graders, we only can go back to, their third grade year in terms of, having had the test administered. And you see that average percentile, again, slightly up. Same thing in, fourth, going back to their first grade year. And then third grade, we can go back to their first grade year, and it's comparable. So when Dan brought this to me, I said, it's worth sharing because it's just another, another data point, because we have only been looking fall, winter, right, this year when we've shared data, and this kind of gives more of a longitudinal picture. We don't have really, obviously, with the first and second graders, longitudinal information for their current cohort. I don't know, Deanna, do you want to add anything to this particular slide?
No, I just really wanted to, touch on that this is a different way to look at the data that we've all been looking at. We're specifically in these slides looking at the average percentile for the grade, different than the percentage of students at or above the 61st percentile, which is what we're used to looking at. So I figured, we'd show this data to add more to the story, to see, any ebbs and flows per grade longitudinally, by cohort.
And again, and I think, Dan, the 61st percentile, we also did that. So if you go to the next slide, we wanted to look, across, and you can keep going, the 61st percentile, what's represented here are the percentage of students that reached the 61st percentile or higher. And I think if you look, with eighth grade and you go back and look at, the fall of the previous years when they were in their earlier grades, it does give us a sense. So fall of 21, 76% were at the 61st percentile or higher. Fall of 19, you had 69%. And then the fall of 18, 66%. So if we kind of look, I think longitudinally, it says, okay, when you look fall to fall, we're heading in the right direction. Same thing with, you look at all seventh graders, we were at 68% there in the fall of 2021, 61% pre-pandemic in the fall of 19 when they were in fifth grade, and then when they were in fourth grade, it was 55% in that fall of 18. And then, I think we see similar trends within these grades. And so I thought it was just useful to put this into the packet for you. I think we truly really need to see the whole year and how it plays out. But I think this gave us confidence that we are heading in the right direction, heading back towards, or in some of these cases, above the pre-pandemic level. But we still have a lot of work to do. And we did the same thing for reading as well, and I've included those in the packet. So I'll pause there. And again, I don't mean to overwhelm you with numbers, and just, we looked at this internally and just thought it was important to share. Any questions or comments?
It's hard. First of all, I've lost you guys. I can hear you, but I can't see you. So forgive me if I'm looking.
Dan, would it be helpful if we stop sharing?
No. I saw the screen. I just have lost the tab on my computer for some crazy reason. Don't worry about it. I don't need to see you. I I can hear you. I find it hard to see these numbers and make any comparable meaning out of them, because I am now, as you know, I think you were alluding, Ken, is that it's a lot of data is coming at us. Like I'm now trying to pull up last board meetings scores to sort of see how they compare and where we are. So, what's your bottom line here? Your bottom line is there's an increase in scores from pre-pandemic.
Just to refine that, I would say, Taffy, we're trending, back towards pre-pandemic levels when we compare the map, either the mean percentile or the percentage at the 61st percentile or higher. We're trending back towards those levels, which I think is a real positive and testament to the hard work and being back to, a more typical, learning focus. But that's not to say we still have more work, right? But I think, if we're looking for a grain of, where are we going to be in the spring? I think, both the mean percentile and the percent at 61st, if you look historically, it gives us, I think, some good indicators. If we're looking for some indicators, because when you just look at the fall and winter scores, it's not enough data points to truly get a sense. And so we wanted to look further. And in fact, I had a parent who had asked me, hey, what's the mean percentile at a particular level? I'm curious, in previous years, what that looked like as well. And I said, well, that's something we've been working on and looking at. And so I think, here, for us, I think it's, real much like when we looked at the F&P scores, at the last board meeting, was telling us we're heading in the right direction, those F&P scores.
Is there any extra, Dan? Oh, I'm hearing a phone ringing somewhere. Is there any particular, where do you place more value in looking at the mean scores on how we compare to the rest of the nation, or how we compare to ourselves over the years?
That's an awesome question. That's a really awesome question. I think I wouldn't place one over the other. I think we have to place them both together because they tell part of the story. So, for instance, there was one grade, I forgot which one in particular, where the number of students from 2018 to current, the number of students at or above the 61st percentile went down slightly, like 1 or 2 percentage points. However, the average percentile for that same grade went up. So that's why we want to show both, because we don't want anyone making conclusions about either or. I think it's both together. So looking at the stock is, we want to look at how our cohorts are doing over time. I think that's most important, right? But while also keeping the frame of reference of national data, especially right now, I think a lot of districts are looking at how our districts bouncing back now that we have some semblance of normalcy across the country. How is education bouncing back? Is education bouncing back? So if this was years ago, pre-pandemic, Taffy, I would say I want to look at our own data, right? Because we're unique. Yeah. Our district is unique. But now, because we're all in this boat together, I think we need to also look at national trends and take that into consideration.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's just another data point, and I think in our ongoing look at sort of where we are in terms of performance and continue to build. And we have the smarter balanced assessments are coming up right after break. So we're, we will have that information on or about the end of June. we'll have that. We'll have the NWA sooner than that,
Okay.
before the end of the school year.
And Ken,
Okay.
one quick thing just to sort of touch on what Taffy was saying. So the data doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot to me. It's hard to sort of figure out just looking at that where we're at, right? So you responded saying, well, things are better. So that's great. I think what would be helpful is two things. One, to have some sort of assessment of how we wound up where we are. And it's not necessarily to place blame, but it's to understand how did we get to the math scores that we're at now, which nobody's happy about? And how does these new better scores or better progress or whatever you want to call it, how or what can you pinpoint is the reason? Because I hear lots of different things. I hear COVID, but math scores were declining way before COVID. So it would be, I think, helpful as a board and for yourself when we're talking to other people on the board, educators, and then members of the community, is to sort of have an understanding of how did we get to where we got to, the low point, and what tools are we using today that things are improving. And it could be that things are improving just simply by ebbs and flows. I mean, it might not be a specific tool. Like we talked about earlier, foundations for the third grade, right? And we're hoping to be able to say, we introduced foundations into third grade, and that's why in April of 2022, we were here, and in April of 23, we're here. But I think it would be helpful, especially when we look at these numbers. Taffy asked the question I was wondering. These numbers what are these numbers telling me? And then you said, well, things are improving. So I think it would be helpful to be able to have some sort of almost like a post-mortem or something, understand how we got to where we got to, and maybe it's just a lack of doing certain things and what we're doing today, and attribute the improvement to what we're doing today.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a helpful way to look at it, because we know we have a sense of the pandemic impact, but there's also pre-pandemic. What was the issue at the middle school, particularly in sixth grade? And there's several factors that contributed to that, and now you look at our action steps and what we're doing about that. So I certainly can be clearer in that, in terms of that analysis, and then sharing that, because the pandemic, from where we were pre-pandemic, there was a 10-point difference in terms of math results in grades 3 through 8. We know that piece was pandemic related, but before that, being either at in the middle school, either in the middle or bottom of the DERG in terms of performance, there were other factors at that point pre-pandemic, which include, you look at all things, PD, curriculum, you look at fidelity, that things are being delivered. So SRBI processes, which we have changed this year.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if we don't know how we got to where we are doomed to repeat the failure again.
Yeah,
right?
I just appreciate that, Dave. Like it's the plane crash analogy, right? Plane goes down, you can go, oh, well, it was Bob's fault. Well, that doesn't tell us a thing. We're not looking for the blame, but we're looking for, was it user error? Was it, a mechanical problem? Like you absolutely must do the figuring out of what it is that made that plane go down and harmed so many people, blah, 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 so that you can fix it. Absolutely right.
And I did want to also add, that's one of the reasons why, Ken's alluded to it a few times, and when we've spoken about it throughout the year, that's why we are really working on, doing assessments like this 3 times a year, right? It's a careful balance. We don't want to over-assess, right? We don't want to constantly give students assessments, but we do need something. We need qualitative data, and it's specifically for this. And so you can see, when you look at the charts, you've got all those NAs, right? And so the reason why we're doing the 3 assessments a year is to help us get to these types of conclusions that we're all looking for, right? Why did we get to where we got to, and what are we going to do moving forward? What's working, what isn't? Post-mortem analysis, and continue building upon the foundation that we are laying right now.
Yep.
So, and I think that's why over, long term, right? The vision is when we're showing these charts and when we're showing the pie charts and whatever, bar charts and tables, no NAs, right? Because NAs are gaps in moments of time where we can't get better analysis. We want to get rid of that. So hopefully we have much more concrete answers.
Yeah, and the numbers only tell a part of the story. The numbers are like, okay, things are going well or things are not going well. But the depth, as opposed to the breadth of data, the depth of, and that's what you're working on in the wings. But so I got to be honest, in future meetings, I'm happy to see the data because the data is what's guiding us in some perspective. But what I really want to see is what changes are being made, what you've discovered in terms of cause and effect and what changes are being made. And then you expect to see the data rise, right? You just do because you've made those adjustments, those course corrections. So, and fundamentals is part of that. Like there's an example, of something you're putting into place that a program did I say it right? Fundamentals? No,
Foundations.
Foundations. Sorry, foundations. That you're putting into place that presumably is going to deepen the experience of the new reader. So that's sort of that needs to go hand in glove with the data. Wouldn't you guys say, Bernie, Dave?
Yeah, just in thinking about the data, if you're going to do a really deep dive and try to understand it in that kind of way, it's, in part, how much time are we spending? I know the middle school is about to go through like a schedule change, which might affect how many more minutes they're getting in math instruction. So that's something to consider. What the teachers are doing during that time, which sounds a lot of like what David was talking about in terms of what programs are we doing or what interventions. But there's a third piece too that I think is really important to track, and that's where are the students at that time, and emotionally, socially, how is their well-being at that point? Because how they walk into that classroom ready to learn is going to affect how much they're taking from the class or what else is going on in their lives. So I think it's really important that we focus.
And the fourth factor is the professional development, the PD, the skill of the teachers themselves who are interacting most directly. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Bernie.
Yeah. So I kind of feel like we're focused a lot on exactly what happens in the math classroom that we can make more effective, which is so important. But I think we're missing an opportunity if we don't look at the state that the students are in when they walk into that classroom, because fixing that component or addressing some of those issues, if we find them, might also have huge gains in math performance with the math actual component unchanged. They're independent factors of one another.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's missing a little bit too when we're looking at standardized math scores.
Sure. Well, I think we can help to tell that story. We have the annual instructional update coming up in May for this next curriculum committee meeting. It's meant to be more qualitative in nature in terms of all of the departments, the goals, accomplishments. What are the new things we've done to address continuous improvement in whatever the area is. We spent so much time on literacy and math. You also hear about the other subjects as well. But I think we can go beyond the data in that meeting, and I think it could be very informative because we'll have Taffy's had this before. All of our SILs join us for that meeting. You'll get a report a week ahead of time.
It's a great meeting.
And it's a different different kind of a meeting. It's a great one that we'll record. We used to do it obviously in person, but we can be able to do the same thing virtually and actually be able to record it. We haven't been able to record it when we've been live because obviously our best place for recording things is in the middle school on the floor of the library, which obviously it's a day of instruction when we have our meeting. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So just briefly, just highlighting the April 21st board meeting. It's a Thursday, right? It's the 21st now. We landed on that after break. We will report out publicly on the developmental relationships survey. We have some longitudinal information now in addition to what was presented at the curriculum committee a couple months ago. David, I do have the actual survey instruments that we can post with that. We have the results, from the survey as well, along with, we'll have a robust presentation discussion at that time. So I want to make sure I hit the mark, David. We do have the questions, right, that we wanted, the results from the survey, which we'll have that too, and then the PowerPoint, the presentation is probably not going to change much in terms of those slides, but we'll include that as well.
And what about just catch Jen?
Yeah, and then that additional report that we had generated with the longitudinal drug and alcohol information. We went back and had an evaluator go back and pull that information together so we could look at trend over time.
Okay, so the two pieces of feedback I have is the first piece is, as I had mentioned to you, having a middle schooler and looking at the response that we received from the middle schoolers about drug use, things seemed skewed. And then I asked my middle schooler, and he responded back that the kids were not answering the questions honestly. They were trying to skew the results. So have we been able to look at whether or not the results are skewed? Because the numbers certainly are alarming, but if the numbers are not accurate, then you're going to be showing numbers. We need to know what is.
Yeah. We didn't get that sense from looking at the data that they were skewed by students just, not taking it seriously. And particularly when you look at it in the context of previous years, that it didn't present in that way, and nor did we get any feedback, through the counselors or administrators, teachers who were there during the process. But, could there have been some kids? Yeah, possibly, but it's not showing up necessarily as influencing the data.
Okay, so then the two follow-alongs to that is, I think, or this is a question. So we're going to be presenting the data really kind of to some small extent for the second time to the public because we gave a preview at, I think it was previous BOE meeting, right, or a curriculum committee meeting.
Well, it was a curriculum committee meeting, so a partial, portion of the board, but this, has wider, I guess, viewership given that it's a board meeting.
Right. So the follow along to my other question is, are you prepared to talk to the results in two ways? Number one, explaining the results. Like, for example, I know that in the curriculum meeting, we looked at some of the results and we asked for clarification because it wasn't clear. And then the other part of it was things like the drug use, drug and alcohol being lumped together as drug use in the middle school. If you're saying that those numbers are not skewed or not skewed enough by, students not answering them honestly, then you or whoever's going to be doing the presentation needs to be prepared right then and there to sort of speak to it, at least at a high level, right? Because we don't want to just give the data and then have people leave the room with, our middle schoolers are drinking and smoking pot in the gym or, on the wall.
Yeah. So,
gym,
yeah.
Right?
What are we doing about it? What are the implications?
Right. And that's
right.
the second part of my question is, I just want to make sure that you or whomever is presenting are prepared to speak to some of the anomalies. And then secondly, to talk to what actions this data is going to cause. Not just drug and alcohol use, but just in general. And it'd be perfectly fine in my world if we said, or you said at the time of the meeting, we're going to follow up with the board in May or June with some actionable items. But I want to make sure that we're not just presenting the data to the public and saying, here's what we collected, and we'll be back in touch in the future.
Yeah.
Why did we collect the data, and how is it going to be used over the next 12 months, 24 months, 30, whatever, right? What are we doing with the data?
Absolutely. And, I know Julie and Dan and Sonia through ADAP have been talking about what they are going to be doing. We have a, rising freshman event that's going to be coming up as well. So we can definitely be able to speak to that, David. But that's that's the whole purpose of, having this conversation, is just making sure we, going to hit the mark in terms of the information at this board meeting, going beyond where we were at the curriculum committee.
Another use for the data, I'm just thinking, and this isn't for the board meeting on the 21st, but rather for the annual curriculum update, I would love to see the longitudinal map data for the ELA and math next to key indicators from the developmental study and the school climate study as well. So we could kind of see a more holistic picture of what the students were going through at each point in time. Be interesting to see if some of our changes in scores aren't related to changes that we're seeing in those school climate surveys and seeing in the developmental relationship survey at the same time.
So kind of looking at where we were performance wise, what's going on in terms of, we don't necessarily have the developmental relationships each year. We just have it, we have it this year with one instrument, previous year with another. I think it was at least 2 to 4 years ago. So, I mean, we could do our best with that, Bernie. I'm not sure how we would, be able to, have enough from more than anecdotally. I don't know that we'll have, based on survey information previous years, be able to sort of map that with standardized testing data.
If we could take a look, but it also might be something that going forward, we could try to make a little bit more of an effort to collect the data so we can start creating these kind of pictures.
All right. Right. I hear you. You want to look at SEL in relation to performance.
Right, because we've been doing a lot of work on SEL in the past couple of years from the meetings that I've been hearing, and all we've been talking about all of this work. And, we measure that independently against itself. How are our programs stacking? But I don't really see a through trend for how we're doing all this SEL work. And, is there a correlation to how our students are doing in these map testing areas? Or in years where we particularly have a very high or very low map testing year, does it relate to, how the students were feeling in the building at that time? If we could kind of build that out.
Hard to make that attribution. I mean, I agree that there are trends, lines that we can see and parallels. Hard to attribute. I mean, I don't know what can.
Yeah, not causation. We were not going to be able to prove that one caused the other, but just kind of correlations. It might give us a little bit more context to understand our math scores, or give us some more avenues to improve our math scores if we actually do see trends and patterns.
I agree completely.
Bernie, that's really good. That's a great concept. I'm thinking about it. Like, I'm going back to my stats days. I'm like, wait, Pearson R. I think that's what it's called, right? Like we're looking at the R correlation between them. So never going to be able to do causality, but I like it. So my nerd brain's going crazy right now thinking about that. I love it. I'm going to start thinking about how we could put.
We love your nerd brain.
Yeah.
Can you also
create your own factors?
Ken, I think it would be helpful too for the Board of Ed meeting just to define social emotional learning, because I have myself received feedback from people who social emotional learning seems to be a trigger item for some people. I don't know why. So I think it would be helpful if before you show the data, if you're going to use the term social emotional learning, to explain how Weston Public Schools interprets or utilizes or whatever social emotional learning, because it seems, although being on the board, it's clear to me, it seems to be a bit mysterious and a bit of a trigger item for some people when they hear that we are looking at the social emotional learning environment for our students to better their educational outcomes. So I think it would be helpful to define that prior to using it. not.
David, can you elaborate, and without using names, obviously, but can you elaborate on what you mean by a trigger? Meaning a trigger to that they're just confused, or that they are pushing back and straight arming on this is fluffy, this is not important, this is not related. Like, go into that a little more?
Yeah, so I've gotten feedback that a lot of people equate social emotional learning with CRT. That,
Oh, for God's sake. Sorry, I'm just going to say that out loud.
but
For God's sake.
yeah, but
Should
it's
I say
out
it
there.
again?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Fair
right,
enough. But
right.
social emotional learning is really about preparing a child to problem solve, to work collaboratively, to understand complexity and be able to handle complexity, to feel reassured, to feel confident. It's all the things that are fertilizer for effective learning. Right? It's that's what it's about. Like, we're not machines that are just taking in data. And you know this, David, I'm sure, but we're not machines that I'm just doing this for the benefit of anyone listening, but we're not machines taking in data. We're people with, feelings and brains and opinions and conflict and complexity. And in order to understand how to manage all those executive functions and emotions, that allows us a healthy environment for being able to take in and retain the stuff they're learning and make applications, like apply this to that and apply that to this, make those connections. So I just wanted to sort of get into it a little bit here, because we are the curriculum committee, and that is a very important, a critical part of any good learning environment. So it's not kind of an add-on, like, oh, let's talk about social emotional health and well-being and learning. It's a critical underpinning of any good education. So I think that's a good tip for Ken and the crew to go into it again and define it at the board meeting. I don't think that's hard to do, but I'm really glad you raised it, David.
Good feedback. I appreciate it. Okay, that's all I had.
Okay. We've got minutes to approve. Can I have a motion to move that the committee approve the minutes from the March 2022 meeting?
Move that the committee. I think so. I'm going to read the motion language, and someone seconds it, right?
You can just say so moved. Yep.
I'm so moved.
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion passes.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.